Hi, everyone, and welcome to our How Am I Really Doing? Discussing Mental Health Among Creators panel. I'm really excited for everyone who's joining us. So let's get started. First off, we're going to start by introducing ourselves. So I'm going to ask our panelists to go ahead and turn on their cameras, and I'll kick this off. My name is Chantel St. Clair. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at Songtrust. I've been here for about two and a half years now, and essentially what I do here is provide resources and create content for our community to better understand music publishing and to help them make more conscious decisions about their business as a creator. I'm also a psychology graduate, so this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I think it's a great way for us to open a dialogue, especially during Mental Health Awareness Month, to really talk about these kind of common issues that creators or anyone might be facing, especially during a time like right now. And I'm really excited for today. Let's go to Mandy.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm Mandy Morris, and I've been in the mental health field for almost a decade now, and I absolutely love what I do. I think kind of have to be passionate about it to be in the field, and started a private practice with one of my colleagues. So I'm co-founder and co-clinical director of Mosaic Counseling Group. And we formed that in 2014. I have various trainings in cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm an EMDR clinician, which is a really wonderful trauma certification, and do art and other expressive therapies. So I live, eat, and breathe mental health all day long.
That's great. And I want to thank you for joining us today. AdELA, do you want to share a little bit more about what you do and who you are?
Yep. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, guys. Good morning. My name is AdELA. I'm a singer, rapper, songwriter. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and Songtrust because mental health is so important and we see it so much in our creative community, but I don't think we have really fully delved into it as far as independent artists and musicians. I'm happy to be here and to connect with you guys.
Thank you for being here.
Now then, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm Tom Middleton. I've been making music since probably about 400 years ago. It seems like a long time. So yeah, former artist, DJ, producer, pivoted away from the music sector a little bit into functional music and wellness. My area of specialism now is psychoacoustics, neuromusicology. It's utilizing the power of sound and music and how it affects us positively to create content for platforms like Calm and Breathonics to help us navigate some of the challenges we have as a species right now. So insomnia, sleep deprivation, anxiety, stress. My content is designed to help reduce your stress levels and bring your anxiety down by reducing your heart rate and respiration rate. So that's the world that I live in. I'm also co-chair on the AFM Health Group, tasked with the mental, physical, and emotional well-being, along with Tamsin Middleton and Christine Brown, to support the electronic music industry. And obviously, we're in a time of crisis, so this is an amazing opportunity right now to be here and discuss this very, very poignant topic. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course, and I'm glad to have you. So that really starts, brings us into the next section here, which is what we're going to talk about. So what we really hope is to have this conversation with everyone about first, where the music industry currently stands in relation to mental health concerns. A lot of creators, especially right now, are starting to feel a lot of different feelings about being isolated, being in quarantine, being away from their collaborative members. And we just want go over some of the effects of the most common mental health issues, and really give you a chance to understand how to recognize them and how to cope. So we're going to learn firsthand from our panelists here about defining each of these common issues and how to cope with them, their personal experiences, and really give you guys a sense of where you can go for resources, how you can cope with some of these, and also just feel like not alone. We're all in this together, and there's no reason for any one of us to go through any of these alone. So I think this is a great place to start here. And that's really just sort of answering the question of why are we thinking about this? Why is it important for us to have these conversations? And I think these are just a few that we pulled really show that it's a necessary conversation to have. I think some of these stats here that you can see on the screen really just showcase how important it is for us to have this conversation. So Mandy, I do want to pass this over to you. Do you want to maybe explain these a little bit more, and also more so just answering the question, like, why is it important for us to have these conversations?
Yeah. So shame and stigma is such a big part of what keeps people from getting help. And these statistics are an important part of breaking the stigma. So I think it's important to acknowledge and look at these, because this is what everyone is going through. You look at the stats right here, they're pretty phenomenal in terms of how many people are affected by mental health. And when we can look at statistics, like 50% of musicians reported battling symptoms of depression, nearly 12% report having suicidal thoughts, 73% of independent musicians suffer from some sort of mental health issue. And this is just, the crazy high. And in my experience in working with the clients that I work with, these stats are spot on. And a lot of this goes back to the working conditions in the industry and the lack of support that is there. And ultimately, like I said, shame and stigma is what keeps people from getting help, which is why we're having this conversation. We want to start to normalize the fact that anxiety and depression and other stressors, this is a part of the human experience. And humanity in general, like 1 out of 5 meet the criteria for a diagnosis. And so in terms of then coming into this industry where there's added stressors, having pre-existing and anxiety and depression is really common. And then that's going to impact performance and creativity and just daily functioning in general. So to answer your question, the reason that we show these stats is so that, like you said at the beginning, people can know that they're not alone, and we can begin to figure out better ways to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to think about it. And AdELA, you made a comment when we were putting this together that like these stats were pretty sobering, I guess, to see these. And why do you believe that this is so important for us to have this conversation?
Well, I think that being artists, especially independent artists, there's no blueprint for us, right? So it's not like I want to go be a lawyer, so I've got to go to college and then I'm going to go to law school and then I become a lawyer. There's absolutely no blueprint for independent artists. And I think we're in a constant state of hurry up and wait when we're pushing out our own music. And if you're already predisposed for some of these mental health disorders, the conditions in which we're surrounded is just going to kind of like intensify the situation. When I say we don't have a blueprint, I mean, like, we're looking to Drake, DJ Khaled, Beyonce. These are the people we're looking to for how we need to model our career. Well, that puts us in, like Mandy says, a comparison trap. right? And then on top of that, not only are we pursuing our passions, but we're having to still figure out how to pay our bills. We don't have access to health care. And these are all stressors that just add to whatever might be underlining and laying there kind of dormant. And I think most artists don't understand what they're going through because maybe they just haven't ever had a conversation about it or done the research on it. And then it falls into, oh, how do I cope with these things? And in the music business, drugs and alcohol are a super accepted coping mechanism. So we're kind of falling into this like secular trap, I guess.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. Tom, I think we lost your video, but I wanted to ask you, you noted that oftentimes people don't necessarily want to share unless they're prompted. Why do you think this is? What do you think we can do to stigmatizing sharing your mental health with others?
Right. So can you hear me at least? Okay, good. So I don't know why the camera, this is a strange platform, isn't it? The problem is that we don't like to show our vulnerabilities. We don't like to share our vulnerabilities. We have to present ourselves in this professional way that everything's fine, everything's all right. Because if you're not, the culture says this is a sign of weakness, that you're failing. And once we start to establish that we are human, we are fallible, we feel, we go through pain, we go through hardship and bad times, this is when the community comes together, supports everyone else in agreement. Because if the high-profile artists are presenting a world of luxury and abundance, and we're all thinking that this is, the driver for happiness, when actually we need a fairly sort of bare minimum to survive and be happy, if we can understand what that is for ourselves. Yet, if we're in this situation where we're not told that it's okay to share, because then we think, well, if I show weakness here, then my competitors are going to think that I've got an advantage over them now. This is the problem. The culture needs to wake up to the fact that we all have bad days. We all go through some bad stuff. And why are we always presenting this perfect world, the veneer of everything's fine, when it really isn't?
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into the next section here. So stress, I think, is definitely something that everyone has, experienced in some form, either it just being, I'm stressed about work, or I'm stressed about paying bills, or it can be something a little bit bigger. So Mandy, can you explain a little bit more about what stress is and how it affects the body?
Okay. So yeah, stress is something that we all experience. And when I explain stress, I get a little nerdy about it because I think it's important to understand what's actually going on inside your body so it can be normalized. So stress activates our sympathetic nervous system. And this is where all of our stress hormones come from. So the adrenal glands, our cortisol levels, and that's why we experience increased heart rate, blood pressure spikes, breathing changes. And this happens due to our body's reaction to change that requires some sort of physical, mental, or emotional adjustment. And this can be an internal stressor. This could be an external stressor. And we're not always taught to cope with, when stress happens, how to cope with it. But it really is a normal response. And stress, it's the system that it activates inside of us is really pretty amazing. It's priming us to be ready, and positive stress is really good for getting our bodies ready to take action for a performance or a deadline. I know, for me, just even getting for this webinar, I felt that surge of energy, and I was like, oh man, yeah, this is stress, but it's good, and it can help you in that way. But then there's other different types of stressors. So tolerable stress is more of when there's a more significant or serious event or situation happening that activates those same chemical responses. And to kind of backtrack, that response is the fight, flight, or freeze. So this is the same mechanism in our body that we need when we need to fight off, like back in cavemen days, like fight off a bear, run from it, or nowadays it's like our boss. And we feel that it's that same chemical reaction. And so tolerable stress is a little more serious, but it's temporary, and it's usually buffered by support or supportive relationships. And then toxic stress, again, same chemicals activating in your body, will happen when there's chronic stress over time, and usually there's lack of support. So, and this will cause a breakdown in the body and a breakdown in yourself emotionally and mentally. So, in the industry or in life in general, like if you're having chronic stress and there's lack of support, then there's going to be a breakdown. And with the music industry, because the kind of the nature of the lifestyle of it and the pressures of it can create that chronic stress. And if you don't already have support in place, then like I said, it's just going to wear you down and cause depression, anxiety, and other symptoms.
Right. And AdELA, I mean, as Mandy was saying, stress manifests in so many different ways. How has stress sort of manifested for you, and what do you do to cope?
So, like Mandy was saying, there's good stress, that you get that adrenaline pumping before you hit the stage or before you're going to perform. And then there's the stress that is negative. The first thing I do is I have formed a support system for myself with other artists that I know I can go to that will understand what I'm going through. As a musician, as a creative, as an independent artist, there aren't a lot of people that Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I think it just kind of froze.
It froze.
So I have formed a circle for myself, and I also have learned that when the stress gets too overwhelming, I kind of give myself that day, right? I can't be creative every day. I can't, I would love to get in the studio and make 6 records a day. But there's some days that are just really off for me, and I just allow myself that day. And I feel like when I allow myself that day off to just kind of like center myself and talk to a few friends and just kind of get it off my chest, like what's going on, and maybe have a solution to whatever's bugging me, I feel like the next day I'm much more productive and I feel much lighter about my situation.
That's great. And I want to thank everyone that filled out our mental health survey. There were some really great suggestions and experiences that people talked about. And actually, one of them that kind of kept coming up was this idea of, and I think you sort of touched on that, you can't create every day. So how do you sort of navigate these feelings of maybe not being where you want to be in your career or in your work and like your current projects when you're dealing with this? Basically, how do you cope with those kind of feelings of maybe inadequacy in creating more or being as far as you want to be?
So what I've noticed for me is writing down goals, whether it's a 3-month, 6-month, a year goal, even if it's just my goal for today. Because what that does for me, it shows me that forward movement. Like while I think, I always say that everybody wants the big fame when they make music. That's everybody's big giant goal. But we seem to forget that it takes a million little steps to get there. And I think when we write these goals down and we can mark them off and we can check them, we can kind of go back when we're having these moments of anxiety or depression and say, okay, I'm not here at the big goal, but I have accomplished all of these things. Like maybe I haven't released my album yet, but I'm 3 songs closer to it. And sometimes as artists, we forget to like take a moment and appreciate our wins, no matter how small they are. And as long as we're moving forward, that's all we can really ask for, you know, just not staying stagnant and having that momentum.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I want to shift the conversation just a little bit and actually.
I can't hear you.
Oh.
I can hear you.
Now.
Okay.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit and bring Tom into this, because I actually see a lot of people.
Hello, hello. You can't see me. I'm just a face, but can you hear me, I hope?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. Sorry.
Can everyone hear me now?
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me now as well?
I can hear everyone. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to move, but as long as you're happy with being able to listen to my voice, we're good.
So I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about how stress affects sleep. So Tom, can you talk about how stress affects sleep, and especially during times like this?
Certainly. So as a species, we expect and anticipate routine. And if our routine is disrupted, and the things that can disrupt it are all kinds of external and internal stresses, very similar to stress, what happens is pretty much all of the bodily systems that are designed to naturally help you rest, recover, rebuild, grow, process on literally every physiological and psychological and emotional level, when your sleep is disrupted, you start falling apart. So the problem is that obviously, you know, when you're going through a time of exaggerated stress and anxiety, through fear, scarcity, you know, this total uncertainty about, you know, what is going to happen next. Do I even have an industry to go back to? You know, all these pretty scary, big questions. Your levels of stress are basically keeping you in that state of fight or flight that Mandy was talking about. So if you're ready for action, you're in this sort of fear state, you're never going to be ready to wind down, relax, and go to sleep, because your mind and your body is primed for fight or flight because of this fear of the uncertainty. So what we have to do is try and understand that our bodies are only reacting to these stresses in a normal way. And therefore, if you acknowledge that this is normal, what can we do to mitigate some of these stresses? There's a few simple things we can do. We will share within the resource assets a very simple screen's worth of tips on how to sleep better, but it involves things like trying to establish a routine in your day. We like and anticipate this routine, so if we can try and stick to going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time, exposing yourself to bright daylight first thing in the morning, resets the circadian clock, primes you for a day of activity. These simple things, moving in the morning, exercising, checking what you're eating, being mindful of what you put in your body, what you expose yourself to in terms of information, media, all of these things can add up and exacerbate stress and anxiety. So it's literally just understand that your body has a baseline of normality, and in absence of that, in these sort of levels of stress and anxiety, everything falls apart. And then you have this horrible thing called orthosomnia, which is essentially sleep anxiety, brought on by the performance of sleep. You know, we track our sleep now. We wake up in the morning, oh my gosh, I've only got 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours sleep. Unfortunately, we need to rethink our approach to sleep, because once we've nailed it, our bodies will reward us, our minds will reward us. The decisions we make, the choices we make are all based on having this quality night's sleep. It is the foundation of all health and well-being. If you think of diet, nutrition, mindfulness, and sleep, 4 simple pillars to explore. Get your sleep right with simple sleep hygiene practice, and I guarantee that everything will feel a little less stressful if you can maximize your sleep opportunity. So we'll share all these tools and tricks, but the other great tool that I've developed recently or learnt about is breath work. Such a simple thing. We all breathe, but when we're stressed, we tend to breathe in a way that's counterintuitive to being relaxed, like hyperventilating or even holding our breath. So learning to breathe again, simple breathwork practices, a longer, slower exhale, very swiftly within 2 or 3 minutes, just by taking that slow inhale through the nose and then through pursed lips, breathe out through the mouth. Quite astonishing how quickly you can bring your levels of anxiety down in a very short space of time. And I guess that will prime you for a better night's sleep as well. There's things like yoga for sleep, journaling, writing down all of the things in your head that are a worry. Try to become present. Get rid of that future anxiety and the past anxiety and get to the moment. So write down your worries, throw them away, then write down your to-do lists. Then you don't have to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. You've literally just extracted all of those current, future, past anxieties out of your head, the stresses, if you like, and you've cleared it. Get it into some kind of routine. For example, listening to relaxing music, looking at all of the different aspects of your sleep environment, and probably most importantly, dopamine fasting. Try and give yourself an hour and a half of digital detox in the evening. Not only does the blue light from the screens block your natural melatonin darkness hormone, which helps you to sleep, but it also hyperstimulates you. So it extends this problematic condition of being stressed because you're overthinking things, you're ruminating. You need to slow down as opposed to maintaining that velocity. And I know as artists, we're curious, we're motivated, we're driven. You know, sometimes I'm wanting to create in the middle of the night. I just have an idea and I want to do it, but just being mindful of all this. Someone quickly mentioned eliminating alcohol. Absolutely 100%. Sadly, those who like a little drink, alcohol is a sedative, so it disrupts the most important emotional first aid sleep level, which is REM sleep. So having alcohol, even if it feels like you're getting a good night's sleep, I guarantee you'll wake up not feeling refreshed. You'll feel groggy and your body's going to hurt. So you've not only removed your emotional first aid, which is really, really important, but you've deprived your body of an opportunity to rest and recover. Similarly, caffeine, we can talk about that very quickly. It takes a long time for the body to actually process and metabolize it. So I would highly suggest just try to maybe minimize caffeine after 1 p.m. in the day. Otherwise, you're probably likely to still have literally a quarter of a cup of espresso in your system by midnight. That's how powerful it is. And again, not being preachy, but just being aware of what you put in your body, how you move your body, how you use your mind, and how you slow your mind down can all help to improve the quality of your sleep.
Thanks for sharing that. Is there some echo?
Yes. Yes.
How about that?
That's good.
Okay, so in talking about alcohol or caffeine, shifting it a little bit too, and Mandy, I want to pose this question to you, and without going too in depth about substance abuse, and actually I want to also kind of state that when I'm talking about substances, I don't necessarily mean just like, you know, drugs and alcohol, but also prescriptions, food, any kind of obsessive tendencies that you might want to stray towards when you're having a stressful, you know, you're in a stressful situation. But Mandy, can you kind of explain maybe why creators tend to turn to additional substances to cope when they're battling like excessive stress?
Yeah. So, you know, chronic stress, it really does break down, you know, important coping properties and pathways that our brain develops and has developed. And at the end of the day, the mind's really impressive thing. It's always trying to relieve us of pain, and we're always it's always trying to help us in some way. And so what we think is helpful sometimes ends up not being helpful. But yeah, without getting too much into it, when chronic stress happens, it really kind of bruises the brain over time, and the stress pathways enhance cravings and loss of control and compulsions. And these are kind of key components in the transition from casual substance use of any kind to something that's more chronic, even despite negative consequences. And so just knowing that, there a predisposition begins to happen when you're under chronic stress from your brain's ability, kind of like what Tom was saying, if you're not having that rest, recovery, and repair, any damaged neural pathways that have been created from stress haven't had time to recalibrate and to be healthy again. And so knowing that, and then also knowing kind of the culture of the industry, where it, part of it is drinking and partying and going to the next social gathering. Networking is a huge deal, and it's kind of a socially acceptable thing. And so if it at all, becomes a habit in any way, it can be easy for that habit to then grow into something more that's an addiction. Substance abuse is, it's an abuse when you're using it to cope or to try to feel normal. And addiction happens when, it's out of your control, and you do it anyway despite the risks. So the other piece of it too is that if engaging in certain substances, because of the culture of the industry, this can really be a way of having acceptance and belonging, and to feel like you're bonding over this drink or this, this substance or whatever it is. It's so multifaceted. And I think it's important to kind of be able to step back and, am I using this to cope versus like enhance a good time? Has this become a habit? And do I feel like I still have control over it? So I think those are kind of areas to really explore when it comes to substance abuse or addiction.
And what's just some basic preemptive measures that you can take to sort of keep yourself from falling into an obsessive tendency?
So I think stepping back and just being able to observe your behaviors and observe your intake. I like to refer to always becoming the little inner scientist of yourself, not the judge. Because when we begin to become judgmental, then we can have shame connected to things that we might be struggling with. And you don't want to do that. You just want to be observant and curious, and then begin to set some boundaries in place for yourself. If you notice that this is becoming a problem, then you may need to say no to that next event, or have a boundary around, like if we're talking about a drink, what your drink limit is, or have some accountability, someone who can help you with the boundaries that you're trying to set for yourself. And that would require some vulnerability, and it's hard to talk about the things that we struggle with. But when it comes to having accountability, I always say, go to the people who love you in spite your flaws, or even because of them, and someone that you can be real with. So having boundaries for yourself, looking at really kind of assessing what that needs to look like for you, and it's different for everybody. Being that little inner scientist of yourself, and then always having accountability as well. You don't ever want to go at something alone when you're struggling. We're wired for connection, and healing happens in the context of relationships. So that's a really important piece.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to move on to the next one, I think. And anxiety, again, I think is something that everyone has either experienced, or they've heard of, or they know someone that has gone through anxiety. I think I saw a few people in the chat also saying, our technical difficulties are a little stressful, or anxiety. I mean, it definitely is bringing a little bit of anxiety to me. I want to make sure that everyone has a good experience, and that the panel goes well. So Mandy, can you explain a little bit more about what anxiety is and how it can affect the body?
Yeah, so anxiety, it's some part of the human experience. Like I said, that stress I felt a little bit this morning turned into a little bit more anxiety and prepping for this today. But essentially when anxiety starts to affect daily functioning, that's really when you got to pay attention to it in terms of, do you need more support? But anxiety is a physiological and a physical reaction to a perceived threat, and that consists of fear, worry. You might even start to feel your chest tighten. Essentially, it's activating that fight, flight, or freeze response. And anxiety, at the core of it, though, it's an intense fear connected to uncertainty. And people who experience a lot of anxiety tend to find that they live in all the what ifs, all the worst case scenarios. I know in my experiences with anxiety, it's taking something that's maybe low probability and making it really high probability in your mind. But what happens with that is that the habit of worry, that those patterns of thinking, obsessing, ruminating about all the fears and things that you're uncertain about, that literally then activates the same mechanism in your brain that you needed when you had to fight off a bear, or run from it. Or so it then causes that same response in your body. And that's why anxiety feels so terrible. It's debilitating. You feel your heart rate go up. You can feel that tension. You can feel how hot your body is getting and shaking and all of that. And so that's where really recognizing the importance of observing your thoughts is important, because that the constant, I call it the snowball effect, one thought goes into a million other thoughts that can activate all of those same feelings connected to anxiety.
And at what point can anxiety turn into like a panic attack, and what would that look like?
Yeah, so panic attacks can happen for a number of reasons, but two of the main ones is one, like I just mentioned. So we call it cortex-based panic or anxiety. So essentially it's your thoughts, the accumulation of worry and worst case scenario thinking can then lead to a sudden uncontrollable sense of doom and danger, and that rapid pounding heart rate and sweating that you experience with a panic attack. It can also be due to chronic stress as well. If you're staying under chronic stress and you're just trying to survive and you haven't had time to recalibrate, it's like an accumulation of all those stress hormones in your body. And then maybe one day things finally calm down. I've known people who they've been sitting on a beach and have had a panic attack. Nothing was wrong. They were, enjoying their day, but they had just come off of 30 days of chronic stress, and there had been no recalibrating or recovering or repair during that time. And so it is common that it can come out of the blue as well. Or if your body senses a threat in its environment, then a panic attack can happen. So, because again, it's going to activate the fight, flight, or freeze response. And if your mind picks up on something that's not right, or, that's where a lot of people who have maybe some social anxiety, things like that, might be more prone to a panic attack in situations where there's a lot of people around. So those are kind of three ways that panic attacks can happen.
And Tom, you mentioned breath work and you explained what that is, but at what point do you think creators should start utilizing that method?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It went a bit cracked.
Yeah. You talked about breath work. At what point do you need to utilize that method for anxiety?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So to utilize breath work to mitigate anxiety, understanding when you can start to feel that kind of build up of fear and things start to become slightly overwhelming, that's the point where being aware that, okay, this is just a physiological and psychological reaction. What are we going to do about it? We're just going to take a moment and we're going to sit, if we can, somewhere quietly. And we're just going to take a slow inhale through the nose. Now, doing this is very powerful because it gets you to kind of focus for 1 minute, not on the thing that's in your head, but focusing on the actual mechanism of breathing. So identify, okay, I'm going to have this moment now for me, and I'm just going to focus on breathing. So I'm going to breathe in slowly through the nose, count to 4, hold for 4 if you want, comfortably, and then exhale for 6. 4, 4, 6. Nice and simple. You can play around with the numbers if you want to your comfort, but essentially a longer exhale with a little bit of a hold in between, and very quickly you'll start to feel that sense of fear and anxiety starting to come down, because what you're doing at that point is you're recontrolling the levels of cortisol and adrenaline that are coursing through your system, and you're bringing your blood pressure down, you're bringing your heart rate down. So it's very simple. It's literally just understanding and learning this quite powerful technique, but ultimately very useful. Breathe in through the nose, hold for a little while, and exhale through the mouth with pursed lips, and try and extend it. If you can extend it for like double the inhale, that's really going to work very, very quickly. There's loads of great information online about breathwork practices to help manage anxiety, and videos that you can just watch people, breathwork coaches. And we do this thing called diaphragmatic breathing. So you put your hand on your belly, and as a species, we've sort of lost the art of breathing. We tend to breathe in our chests, and we breathe through our mouths. So we're not very good at efficient breathing anymore. So in order to recalibrate your system and help it, place your hand on your belly and then breathe in through the nose. Feel your belly rise, and just count for 4. Pause for a second or 2, and then exhale through the mouth with pursed lips, and feel your belly fall at that point. And so literally just by being aware of your body, touching your body, and then being aware of the breath, at that moment, you've actually removed a lot of these stressors, the psychological stressors, because you're literally just focusing on breathing. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, that's helpful for me. At what point are there ways to focus yourself when you have heightened anxiety?
I'm so sorry. It's getting really broken up. Can you say that one more time?
Let's try that. Are there ways to refocus during times of heightened anxiety?
Refocus the what? Sorry, I really can't hear you very well.
Your heightened anxiety.
Are there ways to refocus your heightened anxiety? Yes. So there's this thing called grounding, and I shall tell you a little bit about this. So grounding is quite a powerful technique, and if you remember this very simple exhale, orientate. Sorry, ego. Exhaling, grounding, and orientating. So during this sort of state of panic, the first thing to do is exhale, the slow, longer exhale, and then look at this brilliant little trick, which is literally grounding yourself. Bring your attention to your body. How do the points of contact with the floor, chair feel? Start with your toes and then move up. Do a kind of body scan, if you like. Can you feel sensations in your body? So again, taking awareness into your body is a very powerful area of awareness. And then soften any areas of tension. Just try and relax out anything that starts feeling really kind of tense. And then finally, orientate. Move your focus to where you are. Notice any sounds around you as you sit and recenter. What can you see? Focus on an object in your surroundings and explore it. Maybe try and describe it as best you can. And after that, try and stretch out any remaining tension. So that EGO, looking at things around you, there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 approach of things you can see, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That's another grounding technique. So I hope they also help you with that getting through. Again, these are simple tricks that we can share with the resources.
Yeah, definitely sharing. AdELA. I imagine many creators are feeling anxiety about their craft or about wanting to talk about their mental health issues to other creators. Maybe it's feeling like I'm not ready for my career, feeling stressed or anxious about it. Do you think that this is a byproduct of the industry or just the stereotypes all creators have created for themselves?
So I'm not gonna have you repeat that. Chantal, maybe you can mute yours. So I think that you asked me if the anxiety comes because of the industry. I think that we're all predisposed to something. I know that I was predisposed to anxiety. When I look back, I see that I had these anxious moments throughout my life. I think the industry, some of the uncertainty around it and the pressure of it, obviously triggers some of my anxious moments. And I have felt where, it's funny, like as you guys were explaining it, I'm like, man, I have had those moments where my heart is pounding and, I feel like I can't breathe because I just stopped breathing and it's really terrifying. But what I think helps is to be able to, and I cannot stress this enough, as a musician and an artist, have your support system. And then there comes a point where you have to go to a professional to see, like, okay, what's going on with me? Why are these things happening? And I think when you understand why some of these feelings are occurring, I think that helps you, like what Tom said with the grounding. When you start seeing signs or feeling these triggers, okay, stop and breathe. Pick up the phone and call someone and say, this is how I'm feeling right now. And just looking at the chat, a few people are talking about being prescribed medication from their doctor. As an artist, if that's what you need to be okay, and it's prescribed by a doctor and you are taking it correctly, I think that you are taking care of your health, just as someone who maybe is a diabetic and they need medication. And Chris, just brought up another great point, is independent musicians most of the time can't even afford to see a psychiatrist or a doctor. So, maybe Mandy has some advice on how to deal with that part.
Yeah, there's lots of good resources out there, especially with everything being online right now and done virtually. There's so many even free support groups and ways to get in with doctors virtually. Psychology Today is a really great resource. You can search for a therapist, a support group, or a psychiatrist on that website. And from there, you can break it down. It kind of gives you a filter of what insurance they do or don't have. Do they have a sliding fee scale? Is there a nonprofit? There's just so many things out there. The first step is really just to start looking. And even if you have to go to your general doctor, and that be a starting place, that's a really good option as well. And like I said, with everything kind of being telehealth, teletherapy sessions for the most part right now, people are actually finding that they're actually starting to get the help that they need because it's a little easier to walk in the front door, so to speak, when it's just through a virtual room and you can take that first step. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to a doctor or join a support group just to see what it's about, or get plugged in with a therapist. And if money's an issue, there's so many resources out there. And if the person that you call, it isn't a fit financially, they usually have a reference that they can refer you to. So it may take a little digging, but that website really helps you walk through the different types of filters of type of person you're looking for, financial fees, and insurance. So definitely a good place to start.
Let's see, is my echo back?
No, you're good, I think.
Great. Thanks for kind of going into that and sharing that as well. I think that's a really good place to also push on to the last of the three that we wanted to sort of define here, which is depression, especially talking about, you know, if you're taking medication or something. So Mandy, can you explain a little bit more about what depression is and how that affects the mind and body?
Yeah. So I think depression is a word that gets, well, just like with anxiety, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. So it's kind of hard to know what it really is. You know, you hear people saying that they were depressed that they didn't get their French fries or something like that. And it's more than just sadness. And it is something that we all experience in life at some point. It's, you know, whether we are going through a loss or a change, there's certain circumstances that can cause depression, and sometimes people are more genetically predisposed to it. But it's really excessive feelings of sadness, hopelessness, guilt, worthlessness, and an increased loss of interest in things. So you'll find that you don't really enjoy things the way you used to, or have the energy maybe. You know, depression there's such a strong physical side to it, just like there is with anxiety. The physical side of this is just really creates a heaviness, a lot of fatigue. It really zaps you of energy. I mean, we can now see on different imagings of the brain that people who are experiencing depression, there's lower activity in the brain going on. And so there's lots of things that contribute to it. Some of the things that maintain depression for people, though, are patterns of negative thinking and continuing to stay inactive. So kind of like the vicious cycle of depression is maybe feeling like you don't want to do anything, or feeling sad or hopeless, and then shutting down. And shutting down makes you feel more guilty and worthless. And so then you continue to isolate even more. And it's just this vicious cycle. And the one thing that I always tell people is that depression always lies to you. It makes you think negatively of yourself, of the world, of others. And it's like this gray veil over your world that you're seeing everything through. And that gray veil feels very thick and heavy. And so beginning to break negative thinking patterns and beginning to increase activity and connection with people, because when we're depressed, we tend to want to isolate. You know, doing those things is going to break that cycle a little bit. Even if you break it 10% better than you did yesterday, that's great. But when we stay stuck in those negative thinking patterns, we continue to isolate, we continue to shut down, then essentially the pathways where depression exists are only going to get stronger. And that's why depression over time only gets worse. It doesn't get better. And so the awareness around that is really important.
Right. And the sense of like having this isolation, wanting to isolate yourself, is a big part of depression. Yeah. I'm sure right now everyone is kind of feeling this sort of excessive isolation, the fact that we have to be quarantined and you might not be able to go out or you know, be with others. And I think AdELA, you know, creatives, I feel, thrive on collaboration and networking. So during a time where isolation is required now, what do you do to kind of continue the collaboration or to cope with this excessive isolation?
Well, I have, you know, I have a writing team I work with, and we've been doing virtual writing sessions. And then just kind of group chatting with each other, just checking in and saying, hey, how's today going? Just that constant communication with each other is really helpful right now. And again, you know, someone in the chat said 90% of my income, you know, was from gigs. And that is, you know, very stressful to most artists. So having that support system, I cannot stress that enough, having that support system, check in on one another, just shoot a, hey, how are you feeling today? You know, how's your music coming? All of these things are really going to help us in a time where we can't physically be with each other. and, also a few people in here have, asked about talking to their parents or their families, not understanding that, hey, I'm a musician, this is what I do. This is your dream. This is your passion. Maybe not everybody's going to understand it, and that's okay. Find your tribe. And as long as you are healthy, and, we're talking about mental health, guys, as a creative, I promise you, when your mental health is great and you're thinking clearly, it's like you can create anything. And just like Tom says, you've got to put healthy food in your body and you've got to get enough sleep. You've also got to have that mental clarity. So just like you can find a studio and you can find a drummer and you can find all of these resources to make music, find these resources to be able to be mentally healthy and have that clarity.
Yeah, definitely. I think surrounding yourself with people that motivate you and support you,
Yes.
lift you up, is so important, especially for creatives. Definitely, would you say that having this sort of support system that you've built helps you just stay motivated to create more and to write more songs?
Absolutely, because I feel like my team, there's 3 of us on the team, and some days one of us drops the ball, like, hey, I'm just not feeling it today, but you've got your other team members that are depending on you. So it is a level of motivation, like, okay, well, today here's our goal, we're going to complete 2 songs. And even though we're working remotely from each other, we're staying in constant contact, we're sending ideas back and forth, and that really helps with that isolation piece, because nobody wants to feel isolated. Nobody wants to feel alone. But I also promise you that if you reach out to people in your time of need, or if you're just having a low moment, people are more than willing to help and be there for you and talk to you and be supportive. So, like, never have that as a fear, especially in our industry.
Well, and kind of go along with what depression does is it like I said, it lies to you. So it's going to make you think, oh, I'm going to be a burden if I reach out, or I don't want to stress anyone else out, or no one's going to understand anyway. And so we have this internal dialogue, and it's just not true. One of the things that I love, and it's something that one of my favorite researchers says in some of her books, Brene Brown, but if you wouldn't say it to someone you care about, don't think it to yourself. And so when you see those internal dialogues going on, it's knowing that, okay, this is depression, it's trying to make me isolate these I wouldn't say this to someone I care about. Reframe those thoughts, and then having the courage to reach out for support. And then when you do connect with your other creative friend, or you do connect with someone who's on your support team, and you feel that payoff, then all that gets lifted.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's all about changing your own mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, that the theme here is that it starts with you. It starts with you just changing how you think and how you think about yourself, and thinking about what you're doing, and then having that kind of spread to your support group, and making sure that you surround yourself with people that are going to have the same, sort of ideal or thinking patterns as you, and be able to support you when you have a moment where you're, like you're saying, like, you might drop the ball, or you might have just a bad day, that you have people that can then support you and that are aware of what you're going through. And I think another thing that depression definitely affects, or we've heard before, and we definitely saw that in our mental health survey too, was sleep, that depression can really affect your sleep. So Tom, do you want to talk about maybe some of the ways that it can affect your sleep, and what you can do to combat that?
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Oh, great, sorry. So the challenge we have with sleep is that essentially, when you don't sleep well, you don't give your brain this opportunity to basically process all the information, the feelings, everything that you've been through that day. You need this time for your brain to kind of recalibrate and assimilate all of that stuff. And also you need that quality time for your body to go through this absolutely beautiful natural process which restores you, it rebuilds you, it heals you. It's the most effective, natural, emotional therapy, physical therapy on every single level. I'm just going to share a little statistic, because there's an aspect of this that it troubled me, because last year, or in fact the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of research into this and how it impacts us. So from a study of the George Mason University, this is 27,939 students, so it's the largest data set we've got on how sleep impacts our mental health. This is the most extreme part of it, but it really highlights. So consequences of poor sleep: per hour of sleep lost results in an increase of substance abuse, 23%, feelings of hopelessness and sadness, 38%, suicidal thoughts, 42%, and suicide attempts, 58%. That's for every hour of sleep lost. So if you think, we try to our bodies need between 4 to 6 cycles, which is 90-minute cycles of sleep. That's where we get the 8 hours from. It's between 7.5 and 9 hours of sleep. Everyone's different. You know how much sleep you need, because if you can sleep without an alarm waking you up, naturally, without, let's say, having taken anything, your body will tell you, yep, I've woken up, I feel refreshed. If you feel groggy or sleepy through the day, you're yawning, you feel like you need to have an afternoon nap, you haven't had enough sleep. So understanding what your normal is, and just try and remember a time, might have been on a holiday or something, where, oh, that was a really great night's sleep. How long was that exactly? So if you can consider that your mind, your mood, your behavior on every single level, if your sleep is compromised, if it's disrupted to that sort of level where you haven't had enough, you will make bad decisions. People are crashing cars. They're literally, you're starting to fall apart emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally. I can definitely testify that if I'm underslept, I can sometimes be a bit moody and grumpy. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. You feel on edge because, again, you're thrown into this state of fight or flight again because you're underslept. Your body starts panicking and thinking, I need to be ready for action because I'm underslept. So if I can't use my body in the right way because I haven't had that chance to rest and recover, I'm going to top it up with adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. So you can see there's this sort of vicious cycle of, if you are underslept, your anxiety levels are naturally going to increase, and therefore you might not sleep because you're still in the state of anxiety. So all about awareness. Your body anticipates and loves you if you get this good quality sleep, and will reward you. So just try and invest in that time, own it. Kick all of the gadgets out of the bedroom, make it a sleep temple. Get blackout curtains, get a sleep mask, get earplugs, get red lights in the building so that at night you're not overstimulated and switched on or woken up with bright white lights. Red light at night. Remember that, red light at night. The other good trick is just being aware that if you go to sleep and let's say you just wake up a little bit later and you start panicking, worrying, oh no, I can't get back to sleep. Come out of the bedroom. So make sure that your body and your mind knows that the positive association with the bedroom and the bed is for sleep and #intimacy. Then that's the place for what goes on in the bedroom. Keep it that. Try not to make it a cinema or an office or a dining room. And inevitably, in the lifestyles we live, the bedroom suddenly becomes this sort of flexible space that delivers all kinds of functionality. But if you can keep it your bedroom, your temple, your sanctuary of sleep, get some mother-in-law tongue plants in there that generate oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, get some Himalayan pink crystal salt lamps in there that are naturally ionizing and filtering the air for you. Get the temperature down at night to 18 degrees. We've got a great list of all these sort of tools and tricks. In the afternoon and into the evening, you can get these things called blue light blockers, which are just like glasses, and they'll filter out the blue light frequency spectrum, and that will help allow your body to deliver the melatonin you need to help you wind down to sleep. So just to flag why we've got a problem right now, we're one of the most underslept species on planet Earth. We've extended daylight. we're crazy. Thomas Edison came along and invented the incandescent light bulb. And what have we done? Oh, well, let's just keep the sunlight on in the house until midnight or longer. So if you can get a simulated sunset, we've got some brilliant technology right now that I have. These LED bulbs and a system connected to my phone. It's pretty smart. I just say, right, at this time in the evening, I start to kind of phase from the bright white lights into more of a kind of orange sunset sort of hue. So it's a very soft, slow wind down, and that helps your body to recognize that it's coming up to darkness, it's nighttime, and therefore the melatonin will produce in the normal way. So yeah, there's literally like a whole list of really great sort of sleep hacks that we can integrate to mitigate this sort of problem of exasperating anxiety.
And go.
Tom, do you maybe want to?
I'm so sorry, I can't hear the question.
Are you able to?
Sorry, say again.
Is that better?
Yes.
And what about
when you over like
people that
need
12 to 16 hours? Is that healthy, or is that not beneficial when you're dealing with
the evidence says that there's probably a window of sleep, but on average between 7 and 9 hours. We talk about 8 hours, but some people need more. Only you know how much that is based on what we said earlier on by understanding that. There's a fun game you can play called the Power of When quiz. Dr. Michael Breus has done some really interesting research into sleep chronotypes. You can establish if you're a wolf, a bear, a lion, or a dolphin. And this is wonderful. You're no longer just an owl or a lark. And culturally, this is where you have a problem with some people that don't like to get up in the mornings. They're genetically wired to sleep in later and get up later, yet they're penalized for not getting into work on time. So hopefully in the future we'll have this sort of shift in culture around the acceptability of sleeping a bit later because of your chronotype. Check out what you are, because if you know what your sleep chronotype is, you can also program your day for peak performance. You can optimize your day for making decisions, working out, when to exercise, and when a natural time for your sleep is. So some people are naturally wired to sleeping later. It doesn't have to be that get to bed before midnight. Some people like to go to bed 9-10 and get up at 4 or 5. I mean, each their own. If you can get into a routine, all fine. What I have learned is that if you're an elite athlete or training to be Superman, yes, you probably do need 10 to 12 hours because you're going to work that body to a state of sort of total exhaustion. You've broken down and destroyed all of the muscular formation, and you need 12 hours to rebuild and grow and become superhuman, if you like. So that's, when we talk about oversleeping, yes, there is some research to say it's not necessarily healthy. However, if you are looking for peak performance, a lot of sleep is good.
awesome. Mandy. I wanted to ask you about how creators
combat depression when they're experiencing the loss of like a loved one.
Yeah, so when it comes to grief or loss, and we often associate grief with death, but grief is really any sort of loss. And in this case, you're talking about a loss of loved one. What I'm about to say too could also be true though for any type of loss of a job, loss of career, loss of a very special routine. Even everyone, even with what's happening in the world, is experiencing an emotional response to loss. But depression, unfortunately, is a part of the grief process, and it's a normal emotional process. The thing with losing a loved one or any sort of loss is that we do have to go through all these different emotional ups and downs, and that's going to look like sadness, that's going to look like anger, that's going to look like acceptance some days and some days not. And it's not linear, and there's not one stage that you get to and then you can check it off. It called being ambushed by grief. It can happen at any time. I think it's important to know that it's a normal part of moving through grief, and that when it does hit, go ahead and having some strategies in place to regulate those emotions. So the last thing you need is to judge or shame yourself for feeling depressed, especially when it comes to loss. You know, the last thing we need is shame around that. So the idea is to begin to accept that this is a normal part of the emotional process, and then have some steps in place, like who are your people you're going to call, who's your support going to be, make sure that you have them named, that you know who they are, and give yourself permission to feel. Give yourself permission to have that wailing cry if you need to have that wailing cry. The only thing that I would say is, even when we're depressed and we don't feel like taking care of ourselves, that's where we have to take care of ourselves the most, even though we don't feel like it. So sort of crisis 101 or grief and loss 101 is eat, sleep, talk, trust, feel. 5 things. If you do those 5 things in a day after you've experienced a loss, then you're golden. And to really manage your expectations around yourself as well, because depression is something that is naturally connected to loss. We tend to beat ourselves up over not being as productive or not being able to do certain things that we were able to do, when in reality, you have to deal with your emotional well-being first and foremost, and you have to listen to yourself. So you may have to change your expectations of yourself for a time, and I think that that's perfectly okay. And navigating and moving through feelings of depression when it comes to losing someone.
Right, and I think that's really great. Kind of segue into the next part, which is talking about coping tips and resources. We've put a few up here. This is, of course, just a few out of many tips or resources that are available. We also have a mental health packet that we're going to put in the chat that you can download. It'll also be available later when you get your email for replay, which just has additional information and resources that we've kind of collected through all 4 of us. But I really wanted to sort of do a sort of round table style tips for some of these things. And there were a few areas that I definitely wanted us to focus on, which were common themes throughout the mental health survey. And one of them is social media. And so AdELA, you're very active on social media, and I think you can probably speak to this a lot. There's the idea that there's the real life versus your online life, and the sense of dealing with the negativity that comes out of that. So how do you set yourself up so that you're not as affected by maybe the negativity that might be on your social media? Or how do you deal with the 2 different lifestyles and use social media to your advantage?
I think first and foremost, you've got to look at social media as a tool. If you're a musician, it's a tool to promote your music and get it to the masses. And it's an amazing, wonderful tool for that, right? We can now have our music playing in Africa and Asia and Europe, places we've never even been. But I think there has to be that balance. You have to remember that people don't post their bad days on social media. They are posting their highlights of their best days. So comparing yourself to anyone else on social media is never a healthy thing. You have to understand your journey is your journey. And, you got to be kind to each other on social media. I'm sure Tom can get more into that. But if you use your social media as a tool and keep it positive, then I think that, it will serve you properly. Also, if you are constantly looking at someone's page and it's causing you to feel bad inside, stop. Unfollow them, block them, take these action steps so that it is a positive experience for you.
Yeah, and we were talking about kindness earlier today. So Tom, do you want to kind of continue that? What is kind of what should we be doing to make our social media a little bit better?
Yeah, so when we talk about kindness, we're talking about doing something that is motivated by genuine warm feelings for others, not just an emotion that's shown by actions. And importantly, it involves experiencing our behavior as kind. And what's lovely about that is that once you get into the kind mindset, you realize that before you act or speak, just pause for a second and just think about the context. And before reacting emotionally, and I know we can all, hear something, read something, and the first thing that happens is this really powerful emotional reaction. You get kicked in the guts. Oh, someone said something bad. Hold on a second. You don't know their backstory. Everyone has a story that we don't know. And therefore, if we can try to be a bit more empathetic and compassionate and understand that people say things for a variety of different reasons, and if we can just come back to this place of accepting that we don't know people's stories, and if we can just be kind, even when we're being dissed hard, I think that's a really powerful thing to do. So, for example, some of the practices that you can look at, on social media, write something nice or encouraging on a post you appreciate. Just simply reading a few words, and words are very powerful, as we all know. The impact is huge. I mean, if you read something, just a simple compliment that someone said, I mean, you all know it. You just feel good. You get a little dopamine hit, actually, and that sort of builds up your well-being feeling. Oh my gosh, I just heard a dog and a doorbell. Interesting. Think about what you're sharing. Look at the source of the post and the tone. If it isn't something kind in nature, and if it could upset others, do you really want to trigger people? Do you really feel the need to post it? I mean, maybe give a warning when you do. Acknowledge and validate someone's story. If they're having a difficult time, you don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes it's just, I'm sorry to hear this. Is there something I can do? Is enough for them to feel heard. Try not to say nasty things or pile on where somebody questions another person's actions. Just thinking about comments and replies. Really, at the end of the day, I think it's just having an awareness as human beings that we're all trying to get along. We're all trying to do business. We're all trying to thrive and survive. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not an easy ride for any of us. Even at the levels that we're all trying to aspire to, it's still not easy. These, social media presentations of what that life is like might look like it's all, luxury and fun, but it's not. On every single level, it's not easy for everyone. So I think, remember, kindness matters. And I think, together as a community, if we sort of tune into that notion of what kindness is and to be more kind, to invest in being kind, the world will be a happier place. I can tell you that for starters.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So the next sort of topic I wanted to go over was this idea of, maybe Mandy, you can kind of speak to this as well, is the idea of helping yourself before helping others. I think it's you see the if you've ever flown on a plane before, they have the safety instructions, and they always tell you, that you should put on your mask before putting on maybe the person next to you or helping those around you. Is this is this idea of making sure that you take care of your own mental health before you're helping someone else, or providing support to someone else, really important and something that creators should keep in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the exact analogy that I use with people is, if the oxygen mask drops down in an airplane, you're going to be of no use to the person next to you if you're trying to fit it on everybody else, but you haven't gotten it on yourself. And it's the same concept. I think that there's lots of reasons why we choose to not put our self-care first. It could be, some sort of background belief that seems selfish, or self-care might feel like a weakness at times, or there might be a lack of boundaries in terms of disregarding your own needs as sacrifice for other people's, and it may be well-spirited. However, it is vital to being not only well, but also being able to then do and take care of the people that you love when you do focus on your self-care as priority, and that may require setting up certain boundaries with people, even family members. That is uncomfortable and difficult to do. But if it's for your own emotional, physical, mental well-being, then we have to begin to start to become more comfortable with other people's discomfort when we do have to set up boundaries. So that might look like, telling your mom or your dad that I can't keep having the same conversation with you about why I'm in the music industry, because for me, it makes me feel anxious. So if we're going to talk, let's talk about something else, or it could look like a number of things. It could look like, saying no to a networking event because that you struggle with you're struggling with your substance abuse issue, or there's just people who are going to be there that aren't healthy for you. And so then you choose, that fear of missing out, the FOMO, you choose that for your own well-being, for your own self-care. And so self-care really is a discipline, and we don't want to do it a lot of times, and that's normal. I don't always want to get up and run and, go work out or, do art for myself because I know that it's good. I have to be intentional about it. And that may also require setting certain boundaries with people, and they may not like it, but they're not living your life, and you know you best. You're the expert on you. So you really have to begin to listen to yourself and put boundaries in place for yourself and with other people.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at it. So it kind of wraps up the rest of, or the main part of our presentation. We've definitely gone over time because of all the technical difficulties. So I want to thank again our panelists for staying on, and for everyone else that's still listening in. So I do want to get to your questions. We got some really amazing questions, but I'm going to keep it just to maybe one or two per panelist, and then just for time's sake. And then what we'll do is we're going to share all the questions with our panelists afterwards, and give the opportunity for us to reach out and answer some of the questions that we don't actually get to. So let me start with AdELA first. I think one question that we got that was really great was, what do you do to focus on both your physical and, so when you're focusing on both your physical and mental health, but if there's a day that maybe you can only work on your mental health or only your physical health, how do you kind of cope with any feelings of shame or guilt that you might experience when you can't focus on both?
I just have to remind myself that I am merely human. I am only human. I can do what I can. And as long as I'm doing my very best, and again, moving forward and trying to meet my goals, that's all I can do. And so I forgive myself for not being able to do everything every day all at once.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is a huge part of what you just said, is being able to forgive yourself when you're not able to do the things that you plan to do, or that you told yourself, like, I have to get done today. If you don't get it done, that's okay. There's always another day, or there's some extra time. Maybe it's even just changing how you're thinking about it. And maybe taking that time will actually help make the project that you're working on better, because you gave yourself ample time to really concentrate on it. Mandy, we had a question. What are some things that one should avoid when addressing an artist or really anyone that's struggling with mental health? What should you keep in mind when you're either offering support or you're just collaborating with them, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I think no one really knows how to respond. Everyone, I feel like for the most part, has good intentions. And so I think even, you know, in talking about like the kind of stuff earlier, if someone says something to you, you may need to look past the words and assume the best intentions in that person. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be judgmental of people. One of my favorite quotes by Brene Brown is, "What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human." And you were just talking about that, AdELA. And so, you know, comments like, "Well, why are you being lazy?" Well, they might, you know, they might be feeling depressed, or other sorts of things that could be perceived as judgmental advice or words. Like, it's like telling someone with anxiety, "Well, why don't you just relax and calm down?" Like, that's so shaming and judgmental, and it doesn't work, you know? So just, I think a mindfulness of that, offering cliche advice, they've probably already thought of it. So, you know, more questions of like, well, what do you need? How can I help you? You know, seeing if there's anything that you can offer that comes from them. But honestly, listening and acknowledging someone's struggle or pain, that's the best thing you can do. And that's really all we want sometimes. So we just don't want to listen to us, and we want our pain acknowledged, not minimized, not brushed off to the side, you know, but someone to sit with us in it. So I think that those are just some of the simplest, best things we can do.
Yeah, and it's definitely all about the language that you're using too, and just being mindful of how you're talking to someone or how you're providing that support to them is really, really crucial. So how can we make it safe for others to open up about their mental health? You know, how does the vulnerability help us connect? Tom, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sorry, I was actually finding something quite interesting to write there about an approach to essentially how to talk to people. I trained as a mental health first aider, and they have an action plan called ALGEE, ALGEE, assess for risking, you know, what the situation could be, listening non-judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage appropriate professional help, encourage self-help and other support strategies. So, you know, when one's trained in mental health first aid, that's the first port of call. It's sort of that approach to being non-judgmental and being compassionate. Sorry, can you ask me the question again?
Yes. The question was, how do we make it safer for people to talk about their mental health?
Okay. So I think this is a really, really key point, because who do we know who we can trust with this information? You know, this is like exposing yourself naked to the world, or to, you know, people that you think you can trust with this. I think it's using your gut instinct. You know, is this person I can talk to? Are they just going to listen and accept that this is the information I'm giving them, and they're not to do anything with it that could jeopardize, you know, career or credibility? It's a difficult one. I think you just have to be clear about which sort of level within your circle you can feel comfortable sharing. And maybe it starts with that group saying collectively, shall we have an agreement that it's a safe place to share together, unfiltered, raw, to be in that place of authentic you. I really think it's a very, very brave thing to do for people to share at this level, to be authentic publicly. But what I'm seeing is incredible. You know, how AdELA is bringing this to the public front and center. And there are many artists, again, that are coming up and talking and addressing these challenges by sharing their experiences. Now, this is emotionally intelligent. It's having the courage to say, you know what, I've been there. It really hurt. And, you know, the likes of sort of top level broadcasters and DJs saying that in, you know, 4 decades of music industry, lives are disrupted on every level by mental health problems, from the extremes of you know, suicide down to, you know, relationship and marriage breakups, loss of you know, earnings, careers, tanking. It impacts on so many levels. But once you start opening the forum to share, and this time last year, in fact, in Ibiza, at the IMS, International Music Summit, Tim Bergling, Avicii's father, came and talked to us about his experience of losing his son, one of the most preeminent DJs in the world, taking his life because he just wanted to make music. He didn't want to be out there on the road, and no one listened to him. He suffered in silence. And so that is the extreme case of it. We don't want any more Avicii situations. We don't want people to feel like at that level there's no one to talk to. And so what's really great about opening up this forum with Songtrust, AdELA and Mandy, and their brilliant Instagram account, you have to follow that, is building this community together. It's a safe place to share. And I think perhaps there is an opportunity to create a portal. Maybe it's a private Reddit or a group somewhere where people feel that they can join up and maybe even anonymously, I don't know how that would work, that there is this platform to share, and that there are people within the community that are trained psychotherapists that can signpost people. So considering it's a global community, it's a 24/7 operation already. There are going to be people around the planet right now that are there to listen non-judgmentally and to give advice on where to go for help. And I said earlier on in the chat, even if you might have challenges in the US with getting access to help and assistance, I can say for sure that in the UK, there are a lot of free services that are high level. It's quality signposting to the professional of assistance you can get right now, and they don't judge you for where you are on planet Earth. They're there to listen and to help you. So bear that in mind. The community already exists. All the resources are there. Let's build this family and help one another by feeling, that it's okay to share together.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to that question. And I think I want to end the Q&A with one final question, which feel free to shout out any of you. But at what point do you think one should consider therapy or reaching out to support?
I think that if that question's running through your mind, then you should go ahead and reach out for support. So if you find that you're even having that thought or wondering, pay attention to, paying attention to all the feelings and thoughts that you're having. Again, being curious about them, not judgmental about that. I tell my clients when they walk through my doors that they're the brave ones. I have the honor to work with some of the bravest people because they're willing to vulnerably look at these issues that not a lot of people have the courage to talk about or to deal with or to work through. And so just know that it's a tremendous act of courage. But if you're wondering if you should get help, then maybe you should just take that first step and go ahead and reach out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out for support or for help. Sometimes you just can't do it on your own, and that's totally okay. And that's why there are resources available to you, and you should take advantage of them. So thank you. And I think we've definitely gone over time. We didn't get to all the questions. We had a lot of really great questions. So thank you for everyone that submitted them and took our mental health survey as well. We will share all of those questions and reach out and try to either answer them or provide additional support where we can. I would be remiss if I didn't kind of end this by talking about who are we, who is Songtrust. So Songtrust is the world's leading music publishing administration platform. We administer copyrights for over 300,000 songwriters, including AdELA, and 2 million copyrighted songs. Essentially what we do is we help songwriters and rights owners properly register their songs and collect their publishing royalties on a global scale. And we do this through an extensive network of direct relationships with over 50 pay sources and organizations in over 150 territories and countries. And this really just allows us to empower creators to take control of their publishing and access what they're due. We do this through really simple terms and pricing. Usually it's $100 to register for an account with Songtrust. And really, you know, that brings us to a close. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. It was amazing. Thank you to everyone that's stuck around through all the technical difficulties. I think everyone that's working from home now knows that this is normal. These things happen, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. So I really appreciate everyone being kind and sticking with us. Here's the contact information. We just put the social handles for our panelists, but instead of their emails, but you can feel free to reach out and ask them additional questions or follow-ups or for suggestions on reading or other resources or organizations that you can get involved with. Of course, if you have questions for us about music publishing, about Songtrust, or anything about music business, feel free to contact us at contact@songtrust.com, and our publishing specialists will help however they can. So before we sign off, do you guys want to have any final words?
Just want to say thank you so much. This has been a true honor and privilege to be able to connect with you guys and everyone in the chat and everyone who's watching on a very human level. Mental health is for everybody, and it doesn't, no one can escape it. So this has just been a wonderful platform that you provide this on, Chantel, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. What a pleasure and an honor, privilege, and thoroughly inspirational. I've really enjoyed and learned so much from listening to AdELA and Mandy. Chantel, thank you so much for putting this together. I think this is a really great platform, a starting point to grow and build. And I just shared in the chat, you need to add AdELA and Mandy IG, right? Because that's the starting place for this wonderful new community as well. So thank you all, and always around, happy to talk sleep and mental health and any challenges that people may have.
And thank you again for joining us. And I just the last thing I want to leave everyone with is, just remember that you are not alone, that you do not have to go through any of this on your own. There are resources available for you. We're here for you. AdELA, Mandy, and Tom are here for you. So don't be afraid to talk about what's going on with you, and don't be afraid to reach out for help, and support each other. Make sure that you're creating communities within your own cities or networks that really just help support everyone, bring positivity to the world that otherwise right now, maybe is a little bit too negative. It's going to start with you guys, and the only way that the music industry is going to get better is through you guys. So make sure that you're being supportive and being positive. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.